All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of O365A. In this episode, we're going to be talking about all the new Microsoft Teams meetings features and functionality. There's quite a significant amount of new features coming out from the back-end service perspective and the client side, desktop as well. And we feel like, it's almost feeling like last year when Microsoft was coming out with like the 7x7 view and the breakout rooms and all the additional functionality to help with COVID, and now the pedal is still down on the gas, and so they're coming out with a lot of new stuff. So Dino, why don't you talk to us about 1K meetings?
Yeah, thanks, Hab. So 1,000-person interactive meetings and webinars. So today in Teams, you can have a meeting of up to 300 people, and that's fairly well known. So what we're talking about here is the ability to burst beyond that gap and go well beyond that. So 1,000-person meeting is now will be possible in Teams. So this is coming in May. I think some of the key points here are you'll have overflow of up to 20,000 view only. So the 1,001st person and beyond, up to 20,000, will have capabilities of view only. And I think that 20,000 number is temporary. It's going to drop back down to 10K in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. That's correct, folks?
July, yeah.
July of 2021. So it's temporary just because of COVID and that, but that number will drop down to 10,000. Still a significant number. A couple things to note: lack of visibility for the administrators. I think if beyond the 1,001st person, you won't know who's in the meeting, so you have to carefully consider who has invitations to this. There won't be any auto promotions, meaning if say you're at 1,001 or 1,002 and 10 people leave the meeting, those people are still in view only mode. If they wanted to get to become an active participant of the meeting, they'd have to leave the meeting and come back. Licensing is interesting as well. The advanced communication was going to play into this, but now I believe that's going to die and there's not going to be any more advanced communication. So it's just going to be a standard Teams license. And then I guess lastly, to enable this is going to be a meeting policy that you set streaming attendee mode to true, and that's only available in PowerShell right now. So that's kind of a summary for it. I don't know if anybody else has any commentary on the feature. I think it's going to be interesting to see that in action. Having 1,000 people active in a meeting certainly sounds a bit hairy, but
yeah. I think the big one is that 1,001 and on doesn't support audio conferencing. So if you have a lot of people that are joining the meeting that are dialing in, you want to almost tell them to join early so that they can use the bridge before it flips to the kind of the overflow experience. And I think it has overflow falls under the E3, E5 licensing.
Yeah, which likely, considering the size of that meeting, if it's like, say, a quarterly report for a publicly traded company, there might be a lot of people just traditionally dialing in. So that might play into it. Like normally I would say there's very few people in meetings that I deal with that dial in, but in this scenario might actually be the opposite. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think building on top of that, with the new webinar functionality that they're coming out with as well. I mean, considering that, there's so many virtual events that are happening right now and a lot of organizers having to come up with some unique ways to, get registrations and the meeting invitations out and such. So it's going to be a really good add-on, I think, when it comes out. There will be a registration page creation. You can upload your custom banner for that. Email confirmation for registration for registrants that would get an ICS file. I'm not sure if they're going to be working on setting a meeting invitation as well. That would be also pretty good if they added that in as well. And then just the additional functionality from a hosting perspective, adding speaker bios, pictures, and then being able to turn off audio and video for the attendees. There's going to be attendee reports as well, and then Kurt's going to give us a little bit information on the polls and quizzes a little bit later. And then Microsoft List is also a requirement for it, because that's where it sort of saves all of the registration side of things. So what do you guys think about this the webinar that's coming out?
Yeah, a lot of need in the education space around this, where they're using a lot of third parties to do the coordination of events or classes or all that. So it'd be interesting to see how much of those third parties they can move away from and just stay within the Teams ecosystem.
Yeah, and some of the webinar solutions out there, they're quite rich today, and as you said, Habib, with registration functionality. So I suspect Microsoft is a little bit behind in this, and we'll have to evolve the feature set to get parity with all these other third-party webinar tools. But it's pretty exciting that to leverage that Teams platform to do webinars all up. I mean, that's going to be huge for people in the education space, like Michael mentioned. And Habib and I host a user group. It'd be fantastic to do the registration and everything all in Microsoft Teams. So
not have to pay for a meetup or some other
service. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's huge, I think, as well. That's a good point, Kurt.
Yeah, and maybe kind of going on top of that is, I think this is a late to the market feature, external presenter support for live events. This was a big issue with a lot of the live events where you have maybe a keynote speaker that's external from the organization, inviting them to a team so they have the guest account, then working with them to flip into the guest before they join the live event. So that all will go away with live events. You can now just reference those external presenters, and when they get in the call, you could promote them to a presenter. I'm not sure, with the 1,000 person, interactive meetings, the large meetings, I'm not sure live events is going to be used as much for, kind of creating those within the Teams client, maybe using the live events more for, bringing your own custom meeting experiences, doing those encoders with like OBS Studio and stuff like that, and all your custom inputs and sources, that's where I think live events is going to still play. But with the 1,000 person meeting and be able to control video and spotlighting and having panel discussions and all that stuff and polls, I think the external presenter support will cover that pain point for some that are already using live events today. But I think a lot of organizations are going to move to the large meetings. And then if we could talk about the next big, I think one of the biggest announcements for me personally that was kind of under the radar was, similar to recordings and meetings being moved to OneDrive and SharePoint from the stream storage, Whiteboard is also being moved. So the Microsoft Whiteboard, that data is now also going to be moving this year to OneDrive and SharePoint. So now we can have interactive whiteboards and be able to share with people like outside the organization. I know that the Whiteboard app is now on Android, so I think this is now starting to get the ability to use Whiteboard everywhere and regardless of the audience. So I think this is going to be a big change that's coming, especially on the data residency side.
Yeah, I think that's huge too, especially from the compliance side as well. To be able to set retention policies on those objects, because I wrote a PowerShell script in order to email out users, that their whiteboard is over, 1 month old, and then they have to delete it. But you don't really have any control whether or not they delete it, but you can just keep telling them. So this will be huge, right, from that perspective, right? And not requiring the global admin privilege to be able to send out that PowerShell script, because the whiteboard PowerShell needs it. So from a compliance perspective, it's going to be massive to be able to do that. And then, like you said, share externally. I think that was one of the big things that was missing from Skype for Business that we had before, was the ability to whiteboard with external participants.
Yeah, and sticking with investments in the meeting capabilities, Microsoft recently rolled out the ability to poll attendees during a Teams meeting using Microsoft Forms. This seemed a little bit odd to me at first, just because we have so many different ways to do this today with things like Poly, and there's different apps you can plug into Teams to do this, but I've used it a couple times and it works really, really well. The difference is with this, for a standalone meeting, you can actually go in your calendar, edit the meeting, and as a tab, add a Microsoft form that's used as a poll. What I really liked about it being a meeting organizer is you can pre-configure these polls before the meeting starts, and then at some point during the meeting, or even before the meeting, you can launch the poll. And when you launch it, it shows up on the screen and in the chat. And then the attendees can just answer the poll, and you can view the results or export them. And then you can actually close the poll, which shuts it down for the attendees. So it works really good in terms of just, you know, getting more engagement if you're a meeting organizer, and setting up very specific polls to get very specific answers from your attendees. And there's two types of polls that are supported. One is a choice poll. So that's just, you know, you have a question or a statement, and then the audience provides their answer. So you can just survey the crowd, so to speak. And the other one is a multiple choice quiz. So there's, you know, a correct answer, and you can essentially quiz your attendees. So that's available today, I think, in all tenants for standalone meetings. Support for channel meetings is rolling out. I don't think it's there yet. I think we have a date in August. It's going to roll out to most tenants. And, you know, keeping in line again with just Microsoft's investments in meetings on the Microsoft Teams client, there's been a couple of really nifty and useful capabilities released lately. One's called presenter mode. So you've probably seen this. It's very similar to the presenter mode functionality in PowerPoint. So this is in Microsoft Teams now. When you for the sharing tray, when you go to share a PowerPoint presentation, you get if you're the presenter, you can see the current slide, the slide notes. You get like a thumbnail strip of all the slides in your deck to see what's coming. So it's a really nice experience when you're presenting a PowerPoint deck in Microsoft Teams. And not to be outdone, you'll also be able to present to Teams from PowerPoint on web and Windows. I think Mac support is coming later in June, and this is nothing more than you're in the PowerPoint experience, one click, and you can actually make that PowerPoint present through Microsoft Teams. So that's really useful too. And Dino, why don't you tell us about the digital whiteboarding in Teams meetings?
Yeah, Michael alluded to it a second ago. But so digital whiteboarding in Teams meetings is going to be, I think, in August, moving to OneDrive/SharePoint. So where whiteboarding was its own sort of service, following in line with a lot of other things, you know, the service will store its files into OneDrive and SharePoint. So I think that makes a ton of sense, just to sort of like meeting recordings. You know, it makes sense to start putting things into OneDrive and to SharePoint. So that's nice to see. The other big one is automatic transcripts and closed captioning for video recording. So also, I believe, coming in August. So this is going to have basically automatic meeting transcripts editing, and the ability to upload captions and subtitles to videos also are going to be stored in OneDrive and SharePoint, and which is kind of cool. And then they're also even cooler is that they're making the ability to on-demand like enable closed captioning. So you could be watching a recording, you know, a week later and say, look, I need to turn on closed captioning just to understand what's happening. Maybe English isn't your first language, or the recording was in French or whatever. You know, imagine, you know, just enabling the closed captioning and just seeing what the speaker's saying in text. So that's huge. So that's going to be made available. Again, these transcripts are going to be created automatically as you go, and then viewers can choose whether or not to turn on the captions when they're watching the recordings later. So a lot, you know, again, these improvements are I think squarely aimed toward like the student and educational community. Accessibility reasons, again, this is a huge factor for people with accessibility concerns. So yeah, and then at the end of the day, it's saving educators and the presenters a ton of time from having to do all this transcription ahead of time and posting it. So a lot of work saved there. And lastly, the ability to block downloads for non-channel meetings. So a meeting's recorded today, and there may be issues with guests downloading meetings. So Microsoft's making it possible that any user with just view only permissions of a non-channel meeting will be blocked from downloading a recording by default. So I think that's been a big ask for some time now. So that's nice to see. And yeah, that's it for the meeting sharing and experience. Maybe we'll back to you, Hab and Michael, to talk about the new meeting experience views.
You mean it?
Yeah, that's good. Typical meetings nowadays, right? Yeah, I was saying that from a meeting experience perspective, most people will probably start seeing the new dynamic view, being able to have your video bar at the very top, which I find really more interactive than it is at the bottom, because you're sort of looking down as opposed to looking up now. So what I find is really good. And then when the sharing content sort of comes up and you have the chat open, it sort of dynamically moves over to the right hand side, right? So as you add more or remove more things from your screen, it auto adjusts where the video is located. So I thought that was really good. Breakout room timers for there's some updates that have come to breakout rooms, being able to have a timer for people to go into their breakout room and then come back to the main room, provide them the ability to return to the main meeting, I think is a great addition as well. You can there's additions to like room reassignments as well. And then just something really simple, but I thought that was really good as well, was just the active speaker that basically halos around the active speaker now on the video or just on audio, that to actually specify who's speaking, as opposed to seeing them within their initials or within the video themselves. So I thought that was a really good addition. So Michael, why don't you give us a little bit more about the some of the additions to the experience as well?
Yeah, it's funny. On one side, you're getting a lot of controls where you can like disable video coming. You can control the audio, but in parallel, we're going to be able to control who's spotlighted. So now multi-spotlights coming out this month as well. So not just being able to pin one person, but maybe you could pin a whole panel of people so that everyone's seeing those people's videos, and you could disable the video for attendees. So really controlling the experience for the event you're running. As I mentioned, being able to block attendee video from, the meeting options, while you're in the meeting or as you're booking it. Some of the other improvements really hit on the kind of the education side is, better meeting experience within browsers. So, if you're using Safari or Edge or Chrome, being able to have things like together mode and all these different experiences and multi-video, that's going to, come out to the browser as well. So for those that, maybe of joining a Teams meeting for the first time, they're not going to install the Teams client to get that rich experience. Well, now we can start to get those rich experiences within the browser. An interesting one for me, I'm not, I don't really follow, have a use case for this, but being able to join a meeting by ID. So having a short code, being able to go into the Teams client, hit, put your code in and join. So I know that there's been requests for this for some of the clients I've worked with, but I've never come across the need myself. But maybe this is when you're in a Teams room or something like that and joining a third-party room, you don't want to send the calendar invite over. So that's available now in May as well. And then the last feature that came up is Teams casting. So be able to take your Android device or your iOS device and be able to do something like, sort of like AirPlay, cast to a Microsoft Teams room and be able to share the content from your mobile device right into the meeting without having to, touch or interact with the display. So, or plug in any cables or anything like that. So a lot of big experience features coming out, and especially in May, but it just seems like it's a snowball effect, right? So, with webinars, Microsoft comes out with some base, experiences, and then it just keeps building and building and building on these. So it's pretty impressive to see what has happened in the last year around meetings, online meetings, and Teams.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think there was definitely a quick recap of a lot of functionality that has already come out and what's coming. I think we could have picked one topic and deep dived into it for about 20 minutes just itself, but I know it sort of felt like we were sort of flying through it. So, I think we definitely want to share everything that's sort of, like we said, has come out or is coming out, and all the new experiences that are there. So hopefully you all will enjoy it as do we. And thanks for listening in, and hopefully we'll catch you on our next episode.
That's it.
Thanks.
Yep.